but he only has a small perspective on it.
I do know a lot about polygamy
Comes up
more
and
than
she's
what.
just like big smile, tons of joy.
And
She's
just playing the whole time. We're like boom, 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 whatever.
What if everything you thought you knew about this family was a lie? The smiles, the unity, the sacrifices, it was all carefully framed. On screen, he looked like a struggling patriarch, carrying the weight for everyone else. But behind closed doors, the balance was already broken. Some households thrived, others barely survived. And the wives? They were not equal players in this story. Mary, dismissed for years as emotional and needy, may have seen more than anyone else. Christine's dramatic exit wasn't rebellion, it was clarity. Janelle's calm logic clashed with selective attention. And Robin's silence? It started to feel less like innocence and more like quiet calculation. The cracks were always there, hidden in small moments, subtle pauses, and decisions that weren't shared equally. Now, the illusion is collapsing. The question isn't about plural marriage anymore. It's about power, loyalty, and who truly benefited, while everyone else carried the cost the moment hits quietly. No yelling, no slammed doors, just a room full of people who no longer feel like a family. Everyone sits there, faces stiff, voices careful, eyes drifting away from each other. This is supposed to be a united household, right? So why does it feel like strangers sharing air? And why does the man who always claimed control suddenly look unsure? For years, viewers were sold a clean story. One husband, multiple wives, shared values, shared sacrifice. We were told this family worked because everyone gave a little and trusted one person to lead. And for a long time, many believed it. Or at least wanted to. But somewhere along the way, the tone shifted. The warmth faded. The laughter stopped landing. And the gaps between words started saying more than the words themselves. You can feel it in the way conversations stall, in the way decisions no longer sound shared. There is this strange tension where everyone pretends nothing is wrong, while their bodies say the opposite. Arms crossed, eyes down. Long pauses where no one wants to speak first. This is where the illusion starts to crack, even if no one names it yet. And here is where it gets uncomfortable, because once you notice it, you cannot unsee it. The image was always a man carrying the weight for everyone else. The tired provider, the overwhelmed leader, the one making hard choices so others would not have to. But now those choices feel less shared and more selective. You start asking yourself why some households feel stable while others feel disposable. Why comfort shows up in one place and struggle keeps repeating somewhere else. And that question lingers. There is a moment when one wife speaks, carefully, almost politely, about fairness. The response she gets feels rehearsed, defensive, not curious. And something shifts. You see it on her face. That flicker of realization. This is not confusion anymore. This is dismissal. And once that happens, trust does not snap. It erodes. This is where the story stops being about marriage style and starts being about power. Because leadership only works when people believe the leader carries everyone equally. The second that belief fades, the title means nothing. And in this moment, the man at the center does not look like a protector. He looks like someone exposed. And the family feels it before they admit it. Not everything feels lighter there. The tone is hopeful. The family talks about teamwork, about faith, about building something bigger than any one person. The message stays consistent. Everyone gives. Everyone sacrifices. And one man carries the pressure so the rest can function. That is the picture we were shown, over and over. Leadership is framed as burden, not benefit. Long days. Hard choices. Stress written all over his face. He talks about providing, about juggling needs, about being stretched thin. Viewers are invited to feel sympathy, to see him as someone doing his best inside a complicated life. And in those early years, many accepted that framing without question. But even then, something feels slightly off. Not loud, not dramatic, just small moments that do not line up if you slow down. Decisions get announced instead of discussed. Conversations end before real agreement happens. One wife raises a concern, and it gets smoothed over with a smile instead of addressed. Another pushes back and gets labeled difficult. You start noticing who is allowed to question things and who is expected to absorb discomfort quietly. Watch how resources get talked about. Money is always tight. Time is always limited. Attention is always stretched. Yet some needs are treated as urgent, while others are framed as optional. One household asks for stability and gets reassurance. Another asks for the same thing and gets told to wait. And the waiting never really ends. At first, it is easy to excuse. Large family. Complex setup. Nobody said this would be fair all the time, but fairness was the promise. It was the foundation of the whole experiment. Without it, the structure collapses. And if you pay attention, you see early signs of imbalance long before the family admits it. Look at who gets emotional support during conflict. Look at whose feelings are managed and whose are dismissed as overreactions. Look at how often sacrifice flows in one direction and gratitude flows in another. There is an early scene where a wife talks about feeling invisible. The response is gentle but empty. No plan, no change. Just words meant to move past the moment. Another scene shows excitement over a new beginning for one household, while another sits quietly on the sidelines. Nobody calls it favoritism, but it feels like something close to it. At the time, these moments seem small, easy to forget, easy to explain away, but when you stack them together, they form a pattern. And that is the uncomfortable realization. The imbalance did not suddenly appear years later. It was there from the start. Quiet, normalized, covered by the language of sacrifice. And once you see that, the story of sudden collapse no longer makes sense. This was not a surprise ending. It was a slow build hiding in plain sight. Miri is often framed as the difficult one. Emotional, sensitive, too attached to rules. The edit leans into it, and the family language reinforces it. When there is tension, her name comes up first. When something feels off, the implication is that she is the source. It becomes easy for viewers to accept that role for her without looking any deeper. But watch her closely. Not the big moments, the quiet ones. Mary speaks less than the others, especially when decisions are being finalized. She listens. She nods. She absorbs. When she does push back, it is careful and controlled, almost apologetic. There is a loyalty there that does not demand applause. A willingness to hold the line even when it costs her emotionally. Her isolation shows up early, long before it is openly discussed. Group scenes where she sits slightly apart. Jokes that land everywhere except with her. Conversations that move on without checking if she is okay. And instead of reacting, she withdraws. Not because she does not care, but because she understands the hierarchy. She knows when speaking will change nothing. This is where the perception needs to shift. Miri is not an outsider causing friction. She is an insider who understands the structure better than anyone else. She was there at the foundation. She helped build the rules that everyone else operates under. And that gives her a kind of awareness the others do not yet have. She sees how loyalty is rewarded selectively. She sees how silence keeps peace, but also keeps people stuck. There are moments where her pain is visible, but quickly minimized. Someone else has it worse. Someone else needs attention more. And Miri accepts that narrative, even as it erodes her sense of place. She stays committed to the family idea long after the family stops committing to her. That is not weakness. That is investment. What makes her story uncomfortable is not that she struggles. It is that she struggles quietly. She does not burn the house down. She does not storm out. She internalizes. And that makes her an easy target. When the system needs a problem, it points to the person who will not fight back publicly. Over time, viewers begin to notice something. Miri often reacts late, not because she is slow to understand, but because she already understood and hoped she was wrong. She watches patterns repeat. She hears the same explanations recycled. And her silence starts to look less like confusion and more like recognition. By the time others begin asking hard questions, Mary has been living with the answers for years. She saw the cracks early. She felt the imbalance when it was still deniable. And while she was labeled the problem, she was actually the proof. Flagstaff is where the energy changes. Not in a dramatic explosion, but in a slow, heavy shift that settles over everything. The move is framed as a fresh start. Better air. Better values. A place where the family can finally reset and heal. On the surface, it sounds hopeful. But almost immediately, the tone on screen tells a different story. This is where contrast starts doing the talking. One household lands in comfort, space, stability. The mood there feels calm, even confident. Conversations are about decorating, settling in, making plans. In other households, the energy is tight. Temporary rentals, short timelines, constant uncertainty. Instead of nesting, they are bracing. And the emotional difference is impossible to ignore. What makes this moment unsettling is that no one reacts the way you expect. There is no big confrontation, no explosive argument, just quiet acceptance, mixed with visible strain. The wives who are struggling speak carefully, as if choosing the wrong words might make things worse. The responses they get are practical on the surface, but emotionally hollow. Be patient, it will work out. This is just part of the process. But process implies movement. And what viewers start noticing is that movement is not equal. Some households move forward while others remain in limbo. Promises stretch longer. Plans get postponed. Frustration gets reframed as negativity. The discomfort grows, but it is treated as a personal issue instead of a structural one. This is where leadership starts to feel less like guidance and more like distance. Decisions appear finalized before discussions happen. Questions are met with irritation. The man who once presented himself as the emotional center now feels oddly removed from the emotional fallout. He manages logistics, not feelings. And when feelings surface, they are inconvenient. The emotional tone across households tells the real story. In one space, there is ease. Laughter feels natural. Security feels assumed. In another, conversations carry tension even when nothing is being said. You can see it in posture, in pacing, in the way people speak around the real issue instead of naming it. This is not about jealousy. It is about stability. And stability has become uneven. Viewers are not shocked. They are unsettled. Because nothing being shown is technically wrong on paper. People live where they live. Houses cost what they cost. Circumstances vary. But emotionally, something feels off. The family no longer feels like one unit moving through a challenge together. It feels like separate lives connected by obligation. And then there is the house, the one that dominates the conversation without needing to be named constantly. The size, the permanence, the contrast. It is not just a number on a mortgage document. It is a physical representation of whose comfort matters most, of whose needs were prioritized when choices were made. What makes the mansion so loaded is not its price tag. It is its timing. It arrives while others are still waiting, still sacrificing, still being told to hang on a little longer. It turns patience into a test and loyalty into a demand. And no one says that out loud, but everyone feels this is the turning point, because the imbalance is no longer abstract. It is visible. You can see it on screen, episode after episode. The house becomes a symbol of security granted to some and withheld from others, a monument to a shift that can no longer be explained away as temporary hardship. By the time the family tries to reassure viewers that everything is fine, the reassurance feels thin. Because Flagstaff did not just change their location, it exposed the structure. And once you see that structure clearly, the mansion stops being just a home. It becomes proof. Janelle's shift does not arrive with drama. It arrives with pauses, with long looks, with questions asked calmly and answered vaguely. She is the one who tries to make the numbers work, who talks about practicality instead of emotion, who believes that if the plan makes sense, the feelings will follow. For a long time, that belief keeps her steady. On screen, Janelle shows restraint. She does not interrupt. She waits her turn. She frames concerns as logistics, not complaints. Timelines. Budgets. Land use. Fairness explained through math instead of emotion. And still, her questions rarely land. They are acknowledged and then gently set aside. We will get to it. This is complicated. Trust the process. The frustration builds quietly. You can see it when she exhales instead of responding, when she nods even though the answer does not actually answer anything. She is not ignored aggressively. She is smoothed over. And that makes it harder to challenge without looking unreasonable. What stands out is how often her logic is treated as negativity. Wanting clarity becomes being difficult. Wanting a timeline becomes being impatient. The more reasonable she is, the less urgency her concerns receive. And that is the turning point. She begins to realize that logic does not move a system that is not designed to respond to it. Then comes the ARV. At the time, it is framed as independence, as flexibility, as her choice. And on the surface, it is. But in hindsight, it reads differently. It looks less like freedom and more like adaptation. A way to stop waiting for a stability that may never come. The ARV is not a whim. It is a response. A woman choosing movement because standing still was getting her nowhere. And once you see it that way, her realization becomes clear. She did not leave because she was emotional. She left because she was paying attention. For a long time, Christine was framed as the emotional one. The dramatic one, the wife who wanted more attention, more reassurance, more romance. When she struggled, it was easy to label it as insecurity. And when she finally left, some treated it like a tantrum, a refusal to keep trying. But that framing does not hold up once you understand the full picture. Christine's exit is not sudden. It is patient. It is preceded by years of trying to be agreeable, of using humor to deflect pain, of laughing through disappointment because keeping things light was safer than pushing too hard. Her jokes were not denial, they were survival. A way to stay connected in a system that rarely met her emotional needs. What viewers begin to notice in hindsight is how clear she actually was. She said what she needed out loud. Affection, presence, partnership, not perfection, not luxury, just to feel chosen. And every time she asked, the answer came back smaller. Less time, less effort, less interest. The message was consistent even when the words were not. The humor softens the edges, but it never hides the truth. You see it in her expressions when she laughs and then goes quiet, in the way she explains her feelings plainly, without blame. She is not asking to be elevated above anyone else. She is asking not to be last. And that is a crucial distinction. By the time she decides to leave, there is no anger left. Just certainty. That is why her exit feels calm, not chaotic, not explosive. She has already done the emotional math. She knows what staying costs her, and she knows what leaving gives her back. Clarity, dignity, space to breathe. This is where her choice reframes everything. She is not rejecting the family out of spite. She is responding to reality as it is, not as it was promised to be. She sees the imbalance clearly. She sees who is prioritized and who is tolerated. And instead of fighting for scraps, she steps away. Her departure also changes how earlier moments land. The jokes feel heavier. The tears make more sense. The frustration looks less like neediness and more like honesty. Christine was not asking for too much. She was asking the wrong person. What makes her exit powerful is its timing. She leaves before bitterness consumes her, before resentment hardens into something permanent. She leaves while she can still laugh, while she can still imagine a future that feels lighter than the present. And that is the realization viewers come to. Christine did not give up too early. She left at the exact moment clarity arrived. Miri's story comes back into focus quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. The cameras catch her at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of documents. Bills, legal forms, paperwork that feels endless but carries weight she cannot ignore. Her expression is calm, controlled, but the tension is there. The silence in the room is almost louder than any argument. Words have lost power. And she seems to understand that fully. For years, viewers were shown her as the one struggling to be heard. Emotional, dependent, often left behind in decisions that affect everyone else. But here, her silence carries authority. She does not need to raise her voice to make a statement. Every look, every pause, every careful stroke of a pen tells a story of awareness. She is observing. She is calculating. And she is making choices quietly. The emotional distance grows slowly, almost painfully. The camera lingers on moments where she is present physically but absent emotionally. Conversations move around her, but she does not chase them. Requests are made. Opinions are voiced. She absorbs it all without reaction. There is no desperation, no pleading. There is simply a sense of acknowledgement that this is a system she cannot fix by being louder or more visible. And yet, her story is not one of defeat. It is the opposite. That quiet resolve begins to emerge as the days pass. Small decisions, signing one form, reading another, arranging logistics she knows will affect her future. Every action is deliberate. Every silence is a choice. The heartbreak is there, yes, but it is tempered with purpose. She is learning to leave not as the discarded wife, not as the emotional outlier, but as someone reclaiming her own agency. By the time she steps away, the narrative has shifted entirely. What looked like retreat is now strategic withdrawal. What looked like despair becomes empowerment. She leaves with more than heartbreak. She leaves with understanding, with perspective, with clarity about the patterns she has endured and the truths others may never fully see. Miri's exit is not loud. It is not flashy. It does not demand attention. But it carries weight. She may walk away from the family physically, but the emotional and structural insight she takes with her is immeasurable. The audience begins to see her not as the sidelined wife, but as the one who knew too much, understood too clearly, and chose to act before the system could act on her. By the end, her silence has spoken louder than anyone ever expected, that Robin's presence on screen is striking, not because of loud declarations, but because of what she does not say. Her words are measured, sometimes hesitant, often carefully chosen. There are moments where she cries, quietly, almost behind a mask of composure. And then there are moments when she says nothing at all, letting the camera linger on expressions that are heavy with thought. Every pause, every sigh, Every delayed response feels intentional, even if the audience cannot yet name why. From early on, viewers notice a pattern. When questions are asked, her answers arrive carefully, almost surgically, as if she is weighing consequences before speaking. At times, she expresses empathy, concern, or agreement. Other times, she remains still, silent, letting others carry the emotional weight while she observes. That silence, in context, becomes more than absence. It becomes a statement, a shield, and a lens into priorities that are not always visible on camera. The contrast is clear when juxtaposed with moments of tears. Her tears are never performative. They are delayed, reserved for moments when words cannot capture the strain. Yet the timing of those tears often amplifies scrutiny rather than sympathy. She cries in private spaces or in minimal camera coverage, leaving viewers wondering what she feels versus what she reveals. Every instance of absence or restraint starts to feel meaningful, almost coded, as if silence itself is carrying a message that words cannot. Under pressure, that silence shifts. Words that would normally convey honesty now feel like omission. Moments meant to reassure or explain feel incomplete, leaving viewers searching for intent. The careful pacing of her statements, combined with the long stretches of quiet observation, forces the audience to question, is this caution or calculation? Is it innocence, or is she benefiting from the uncertainty around her? The uncertainty itself becomes part of the story. By the end of these sequences, the audience begins to notice the tension between presence and absence. Robin is engaged, but she is never fully exposed. She participates, but she does not dominate. And that duality creates doubt. Is she genuinely unaware of the imbalances, or has she learned to navigate them quietly, with strategic patience? Each scene builds on this ambiguity, forcing viewers to reconsider her role in the family dynamic. Her silence, once comforting or assumed innocent, now carries weight. It forces reflection on choice, benefit, and consequence. The very moments she chooses not to speak become more revealing than any argument or confession. And as the episodes unfold, viewers are left questioning whether what appears to be composure is actually control, and whether her benefits come at the cost of clarity for everyone else. The marriage dynamic starts to show cracks once stress enters the household. On screen, decisions that once seemed shared now feel uneven. Conversations about responsibilities, finances, and priorities are brief and measured, leaving little room for debate. The wives speak carefully, weighing every word. The man at the center, once confident and assured, now hesitates, pauses, and sometimes redirects questions back to the women, as if unsure of authority or wary of conflict. Blame patterns begin to emerge naturally, and viewers notice the repetition. When a problem surfaces, it is rarely addressed as a system failure. Instead, attention shifts subtly to the person raising the concern. Janelle's logic is questioned. Christine's frustration is framed as impatience. Miri's observations are minimized. And Robin's restraint is interpreted as either passivity or careful timing. The audience can see the mirror of past behavior. The same cycles that once maintained order now amplify tension. Observers do not need to speculate. The camera shows small, revealing details. Closed doors, sidelong glances, clipped sentences. A household conversation about moving or resources can feel tense even when no one is yelling. A wife asks a simple question, and the answer comes delayed, vague, or redirected. That hesitation speaks volumes. The system is under pressure, and the responses reflect the control patterns that governed the family for years: selective attention, delayed action, and implied authority. By the end of these sequences, symmetry becomes clear. The control once exercised confidently has eroded. Decisions are no longer taken for granted. The authority that maintained the household's image now feels conditional. The same dynamics that allowed one person to direct and prioritize for years are mirrored in the loss of cohesion, trust, and clarity across the family. What was once influence now teeters into uncertainty. Viewers watching these patterns can see it plainly. The balance of power, once taken for granted, is slipping. The cycles that structured loyalty, obedience, and attention are now reflecting the very instability they helped hide. Past control and present loss exist on the same spectrum, and the audience cannot ignore the echo of history playing out in real time. Over the years, the show that began as a look into plural marriage quietly transformed into something far more revealing. It was never only about faith, love, or unconventional family life. On screen, it became a careful study of power, favoritism, and loyalty. The cameras captured what words could not: who was prioritized, who was deferred, and who quietly absorbed decisions without recognition. Each episode layered tension on top of tension, not with shock, but with repeated patterns that viewers began to recognize instinctively. The imbalance between households, the selective attention, and the careful timing of emotional support became the lens through which the family could be understood. It was not about wealth or status, though those elements were visible. It was about influence, control, and the quiet ways that loyalty was rewarded or punished. Decisions that once seemed mundane revealed patterns over time, showing a system where some voices mattered more than others, where silence could be as powerful as speech, and where presence on screen did not always equal presence in the family's hierarchy. What makes the franchise-level impact so striking is how these dynamics play out beyond the family itself. The show became a mirror for viewers, reflecting their own sense of fairness, patience, and judgment. People watched not only to follow the drama, but to measure what they might tolerate, question, or recognize in their own lives. Every tear, pause, and gentle correction became more than entertainment. It became a study in human behavior under structured inequality. And in that light, the narrative leaves a heavy impression. Loyalty is tested. Favoritism is visible, and power is never absolute. It shifts, erodes, and exposes truths long hidden. The family we once cheered for is revealed as complex, layered, and fallible. Every choice, every quiet decision, every observed pattern adds up to a story about the consequences of who is seen, who is heard, and who is overlooked. So as we watch the final frames, the question lingers: if you were in their shoes, would you stay loyal? Or would you step away to protect yourself? Who would you trust, and at what cost? The audience is left holding these questions, carrying the weight of observation long after the cameras stop rolling. The family may still appear united on camera, but the cracks are deeper than anyone imagined. Silence, favoritism, and unspoken power have rewritten the story. And now the audience is left asking, who truly benefited? And who paid the emotional cost no one is talking about?